class. It's been several weeks since I last put anything up. I apologize for that, but time to move back on again. Today I want to talk about hamstrings, and we tend to think of those as places we stretch, which is very nice, but they have other things to do too. So just to go over a little bit of basic anatomy, there are on each side 3 hamstring muscles, and they're all attached up here on your sitting bone and go down the back of your leg, and the other end, one is towards the outside of your knee, below your knee. One is a little off center but towards the inside, also below the knee, and the third comes all the way to the inside of the knee, below the knee. And so for the most part, except for a little part of the outside one, they don't actually touch on the thigh bone. So they're crossing at your hip, which helps to straighten the hip. They cross at your knee, which produces bending the knee. But if you are a person who is tight in the hamstrings, sometimes just knowing that they are floating along the thigh bones can help to stretch those out a little bit. Anyway, coming down to just take a look at this a little bit further, because they're attaching over here on your sitting bones, as are some of the rotation muscles that we talked about in a different class, your hamstrings and your turnout can be involved very much with each other. Also because of their connection into the back of the knee, I'll bring this up right away, that if we are overacting turnout below the knee, that is involved with that outside hamstring, and that can put pressure on the knee, so something that we want to avoid. Anyway, if you touch in behind your knee, you can feel those different tendons. So particularly on the outside, nice thick tendon right there. You can feel how that connects. Then if you go in the back, you may feel the tendon sticking out back along the back of your knee, again, a little bit closer to the inside off center. And then on the very inside can be a little harder to distinguish the hamstring, also because there are several other muscles, inner thigh muscles and your sartorius muscle, which are all connecting there. Anyway, so as noted, bending the knee, straightening the hip can be involved in helping to get our posture. Because they're crossing the knee here and some of our calf muscles also crossing the knee, they can be involved in, if you are a hyperextended type person, can be involved with that. What else do I want to talk about with that? Oh, just some other ideas, just with muscles in general. We're familiar with the idea of contract. So I'm contracting a muscle. I can release a muscle, contract, release, all of that. There's a concept that we use in dance and other movement that has to do with how muscles contract and how muscles release. And the hamstrings are a particularly good place to feel this. I'm going to turn a little bit on a diagonal so you can feel it. So if I go to reach forward towards my feet, the muscles start to pull me back. So I'm not moving myself forward, moving myself back, moving myself forward and back. That once I move forward, the muscle wants to pull me back. And that's something called stretch reflex. We use it for this bounce idea here. We use it frequently in some modern techniques. Limon uses that a lot. A lot of contemporary dance makes use of that, some more urban styles as well. It's something that we want to be gentle with. It used to be thought powerful bounce, and that actually puts a lot of stress on the muscle. It gets upset if it's because that stretch reflex, that contraction action, is the feeling that, oh, you're going to go too far, I need to pull you back. So then, if it does go too far, the muscle can end up either cramping or possibly being pulled further than we want it to go. So want to be, again, gentle with that. Going to just do a couple of releasing sort of things for you. So just to see, where is your hamstring stretch right at the moment? Again, these are muscles that we think about stretching because we want to have our high legs and ability to move around. So just getting a sense of, first, how low to the floor are you going right at this moment? And just gonna, check that out. Okay, that's where I am right now. And then going to give myself a little thigh massage. If you have a stick or a ball or something like that, you can give yourself a little motivation here, or you can just use hands, just giving that just a little release. So right at the moment, I'm attending to the quad muscles, sartorius muscles, the hip flexor, and knee straightening muscles along the front of the thigh. And just going to do one for the moment, and then come up and going to check out what my hamstring stretch feels like. And that side, all of a sudden, willing to go a lot lower. So again, I didn't do anything to the hamstring there, but what I did do is deal with the opposition muscle. So in the process of doing that, that allowed me to drop that much lower, to find that much more release stretch on that side. So I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side. So just giving that a little massage, and take your time, give yourself what you need here. So just giving yourself a moment to give that a little bit of a stretch. And again, going to come up and see, did that create, yeah, so now I have a little bit more stretch into both sides and able to lower down from there. Another one that influences this forward bending stretch that you may have done with me in another class, just going to come in here, right over by the front of the shoulder, and want to give that a little massage. And other side here. These are the muscles in particular, well, especially these days, we may be spending a lot more time sitting, facing computers, talking over Zoom, things like that, possibly holding up iPads or phones or different devices. So these are the muscles that tend to kind of pull my shoulders in this way. And another way I can get at them is to tuck my thumbs under, just give a little extra pull here. But if I get this kind of sense of getting these muscles here to lift up off my chest, then as I go forward, and here if I do the same thing, if I reach in and pull those muscles off my chest, all of a sudden again I'm even lower towards the floor. So just by expanding the space here, I've created space along the entire front line, or back line, reaching up. Anyway, going on from here, let's do this as well. So come on back down one more time, and Again, those of us who work in turnout, other things, often are tighter along the outside than the inside. And so as I go here, if I bend just my left leg, heel is still down, both heels still down, that's putting a little more pull into the outside here. So that gets a little bit of extra stretch. And then I'm going to come up. This side may not show as well, it's tighter, but again, getting that stretch going through a little bit more of the feeling of the outside. That again, usually the place where we need it more. And let that come back. So moving on from here, going to give you a chance to feel more of the hamstrings and hamstring activation. So I'm going to lie down. These are muscles that are kind of easy to find and feel because they are on the surface. So as I lie down here, I'm going to take my right leg and hold on, and I'm wrapping my hands together just right behind the hamstring here. And now I'm going to push my leg against my hands. I can even let that pick me up a little bit. And so I can feel the muscle contracting in my hands. So similar to the bicep here, which kind of pokes out as I flex it, here I'm doing the same thing. I'm flexing the muscle, and that's causing it to pop out a little bit, to contract. And then I can draw it back in. And pushing that away. And draw it back. And push away. And bring it back. One more time, pushing that away. And I'll bring it back. I'm going to let that leg down for a moment and just also get a sense of how the two sides feel into the floor. So same thing working through the left side. I'm going to push that side away. I can even let it pick me up a little bit. I'm going to expand on this in a moment. And then let that come back. And push it away. And bring it back. And push away. And bring it back. And one more time, push away. And bring it back. Now, if I want to expand on that, so just take a moment, and I'm going to stretch arms overhead. I'm just going to take just a little roll up and roll back down. I want to get a sense of what that feels like for you right now. And in particular, how does your lower back feel? Is that a place that you tend to be tight? So we can use the hamstrings to help to open up the lower back as well. So now, essentially doing the same thing I did a moment ago, that I'm going to push my leg against my hands, but this time I'm pushing so much that it brings me up. Note that my arms are staying extended, so I'm not trying to pull my leg towards my body. And on the way back down, I'm still pushing my leg against my hands. And that's giving me a counterbalance so that I can be very articulate going through my back on the way down. I'm going to do that a couple more times here. So I'm articulating on the way up, really allowing my spine to go vertebra by vertebra, and using, it's not that I'm not using the abdominals, but I'm using the counterbalance of this force of my leg, this activation of the hamstring pushing my leg down against my hands to maintain the sense of control here. One more time. And taking that back down. And other leg here. So reaching this side up, again holding on. And often the two sides can feel very different, especially if you have any sort of scoliosis or differential tightness, different tightnesses on the two sides. It may well feel different, one side versus the other. And for a lot of very flexible dancers, this activation that I'm doing can be challenging because you might be very flexy, you might be able to bring your leg all the way to your head, which I cannot do. But then as you're trying to go, you might not be used to using this consistent activation of the muscle. And so sometimes people trying to activate this will kind of do this version. And as you can see, this leg, the hip flexor popped up because that's what it wants to do. So in this case, again, I'm defeating or I'm counterbalancing that hip flexor action by keeping the hamstring engaged. And then I'm going to lower that back down, reach arms overhead, and take that roll up again like I did before. So this moving, again, just a little bit more easily through, especially if you are a person who is prone to being tight in the lower back and find some of these rolling up and down exercises hard to do. Okay, let me just check my note. Okay, so a way that we can develop some of that strength into the hamstrings is working bridging type movements. So pelvis pressing. We've talked about these in the context of using the gluteal muscles to elevate up and elevate back down. Hamstrings can and will be involved in this as well. And if you want to emphasize the feeling of the hamstrings, can flex your heels and or think of pulling your hips towards your heels on the lift up, probably feel more activation into the hamstrings here as I'm going up and as I'm going down. So getting those going. One more time here. And again, I can keep my feet down, but I'm thinking more of activating through the hamstrings by keeping some of that hip to heel pull going so that actively bends the knee more and is straightening the hip. So that's both of the hamstrings functions simultaneously. Want to come up a moment, and again for my hyperextended people in particular, which I can demonstrate very, very well. So if I let my knees go into hyperextension, that is kind of hanging back in the tendons there. And what that also does generally is send a little bit of internal rotation that the inside hamstrings letting go more than the outsides. And so then if I want to, and especially if I'm hyperextended, that will tend to also want to throw my pelvis forward. So if I get my pelvis back, all of a sudden those hamstrings start to kick in a little bit more with their support behind the knee, and then I can't fall back quite as much. So that knees going back, pelvis going forward, go together, and the hamstrings can be part of the support of keeping you more up and down on the plane here. When my brother was a kid, he had a problem with one leg and had to wear a brace on his leg, so that the brace had locks on either side, so that when he wanted to bend his leg, that he would unlock the brace and then he could bend. But then when he wanted to have his leg straight, that those locks would kick in and help to keep his leg straight. And it eventually healed, so everything was well from there. But I bring that up because, again, for those of us with the knees that push back a little bit, as I'm going to bend here, I might get the bend in the outside going before the bend in the inside. And that will tend to send my legs going towards each other. So that's where some of that difficulty comes. And then sometimes we'll try and fix it by overly pushing in the other direction. That often creates a lot of tension in the ankles, which we'll talk about in another class. But if I think about that brace idea, and that I have to unlock the inside ones as well as the outside ones and send inside of my knee as well as the outside of my knee to bend, then that gets the line going very straight. And as mentioned before, again, many of us, especially if we're working in turnout, are tighter in the outside hamstrings, might have a little more trouble feeling those inside hamstrings. And so to give that a little bit more activation, I'm going to come over here by the wall because that's an easier place to feel it. So just bringing my feet up on the wall here, and that way also I can touch those tendons again. And this time I'm going to activate bending my knees, and I want to focus on really getting these tendons, these inside ones, very, very active. So I'm thinking of making my knees very sharp and pointy and very active along these inside here. The outside working a little less right now. And rolling that back down. Again, if you're used to being a little like this, then all of a sudden these ones very busy, these not so busy, so want to stay really parallel here. And again, focus on thinking of those inside hamstrings that can use a little bit more of the work and help to peel back down. I'm going to do that a couple more times here. And as I'm doing this, in this case, I'm articulating up and down through my spine. So again, like with the roll-ups from before, using the chance here to give my lower back a little bit of extra stretch. And I'll just take that one more time. So then as I come up from here and come back up to standing, again, I might feel a little bit more active here in those inside hamstrings. So again, as I go to take my plie, might feel that support there a little bit more. And then as I go to stretch myself up, again, I'm keeping some of that support as opposed to letting it drop away. And a couple more times, just looking for this sensation. Calf muscles involved too. Good. And taking that back. And one more time here. And back up. So if I lie down here on my stomach and bend my legs up, again, what a lot of you may have is something like this. So that again is those inside or outside hamstrings being a little extra tight compared to the inside ones. I'm not weight bearing here, so that's not such a problem for my knees right now. But again, we want to encourage ourselves to find more of this balance through the two sides. Going to work on that a little bit. Want to bring over, if you have something, a table or a piece of furniture that you can be on for these next things where you can have your knees off the edge, it may be a little more comfortable. You can do this on the floor, but when the legs go to get very stretched, sometimes it's uncomfortable to have the kneecaps against the floor. So here, I'm going to activate my hamstrings. So I'm bending at the knee to pull up. Again, I may feel those muscles contracting. And I'm trying as well with thinking about the last exercise to use the insides as well as the outsides. Then if I go very slowly on the way down, slowly and deliberately, that's asking the muscles to find a sense of release, and especially the further I go, the more I might notice, oh, the outside's tighter, the outside's more active, and want to give them the chance to go very slowly and to achieve their full release. And with this, looking for sensation, if your body produces that for you, looking for slow and deliberate motion with this. Don't need to be so slow on the way up, but on the way back down, that I want to let these move slowly and as smoothly as possible. And what you might notice are places where your leg might shake a little bit, jerk a little bit, something like that. And those are places where your nervous system has a little bit lost track of contracted places in the muscle. So then by going over this a few times and really trying to be very smooth and to experience the entire route here, going from the bend to the full release. That gives me a chance to work on smoothing out some of those places, and that just gives me better control. And therefore, the opportunity to make more specific choices in my movement. So you can do these a number of times. If you want to add a little bit more pressure, you can cross one leg over the other, and therefore here my right leg is needing to carry some of the weight of my left, and then my left is just hurrying the right a little bit. It's just giving it a little bit of extra pressure. You could do the same thing by putting on an ankle weight. And I'll do that with the other side. So now the left lifting the right. And the right just giving the left a little extra work to do on the way down. you can do those again as many times as you choose, but now having done that several times and released through, if anything, oddly, my hamstrings, they've gotten some release. I again, can get down pretty low, but I'm also a little less inclined to hyperextend here. So I feel as though I've gained more control over the muscles along my legs. And going to do just a couple more release type things. So going back to the wall here, or actually I'll do it this way, sitting first. And then we'll do a variation with legs up the wall. So I'm going to come here and going to cross my left over the right. And I'm pulling my right foot. I'm using my left foot to pull my right foot into a flex. Because again, the calf muscles crossing, they're coming up above the knee as the hamstring's going down below the knee, that the stretch of your calf muscles, your gastrocnemius in particular, and the stretch of your hamstrings often working in conjunction with each other. So here I'm trying to keep both of those on the stretch. And then, again, if I rotate a little bit, I'm emphasizing that outside line, stretching that out a little bit more. So then switching sides, and I'll just turn to give you a slightly better view. So again, crossing that over and trying to pull my foot back. And by using the little twist, that also, again, emphasizing the stretch up the outside hamstring, which is also stretching out your iliotibial band, getting some of the rotators a little bit, the glute muscles a little stretched out as well. Another way I can emphasize that relationship of the calf muscles and the knees. Let me throw this in here as well. So in dance there are, we use plie all the time, but there are a couple of different kinds of plie that we're using. So we may have a sense of a deeper, more expansive leg bend, which even when I'm talking about the plie, there's a sense of expansion with that. Or I may be looking for a deeper sort of stretch. So as I come forward here and I go to take a plie, rather than thinking of my hips moving down here, what I want to think is that I'm pulling my knees forward, away from the stretch, or away from making a longer line between the sit bones and the heels, but trying to keep those sit bones up very high, and that creates more of a stretch, as opposed to just moving down and up. So if you have a yoga strap, you could also probably do something like this with a theraband. So again, if I bring my leg up here, just seeing where this stretch is right now. So if I have my foot somewhat pointed or loose, I can get to about here. But if I take the strap and wrap it around so that it's going to force my foot to stay in more of an ankle flex. Now I can only go to here, and where I'm actually experiencing more of the stretch is again down here in the calf and where the hamstring and the calf are overlapping with each other. So this can be a good test case for you. Just trying to pull that to get the deeper stretch. And if you're a person with tight calves, again, we'll get to the calves and the feet in the next class or two, then this can help to open some of that up. So with this side, and this is my tighter side, so even with the soft foot only going about here, but then as I take that around my foot, so the wrapping here, just so you can see it, I'm wrapping around my heel and then crossing the strap over my foot so that it's wrapped around and holds my foot into the flex. And then that does make my stretch look a little bit less. But as I go to work through that, I can open it up a little bit more. And going back to the wall. And this time, going to bring my hips as close to the wall as I can to have legs going up the wall. And so in this position, then I'm into a forward bend kind of position, but now going to cross. So I'll cross the right over the left. I'm going to start to slide my left leg. I'm trying to keep my hips, both sit bones facing towards the wall, so I'm not swinging my hips around, but I'm going to let that move over a little bit. And again, this putting a powerful stretch into outside hamstring, IT band, things along the outer hip that might be tight. I can move my foot over and push the left leg against the right, and then release that, and it might move over a little bit further. So again, we're working that contract and then release to get a little bit more release. And contract and release. And one more time, contract and release. And again with this, I'm also trying to keep both hips down. So some of you may be able to drop your leg way to the side, but some of you, when you drop your leg way to the side, that hip may lift up off the floor. So you're trying to keep two hips on the floor. Still, some of you will be able to go over a lot further than I can. So here, moving into the second side, so I've got now right leg reaching over toward the left, and then I can move the foot over to it and press the right back up towards the right, and then release, slide it down a little bit more. And press and release, and let it slide, and press and release, and let it slide one more time. Press and release, and let that slide. So then you can bring that back up. Of course, if you want to stretch out the inner thighs, inner hamstrings as well, then you can go in this direction. And again, most of you can probably drop further than I can right at the moment, but letting that stretch out in that direction also if you have the space to do so. Okay, just want to check and make sure I've covered most of what I wanted to do. Okay, and one more release type thing. So you can use a small ball for this. A tennis ball is fine, or whatever you have. And I'm going to take the ball under my sit bone. So here I'm kind of sitting up on the ball, on my sit bone, supporting, and going to give a little massage around. Now as I do this, want to caution, you can go around to the inside of your sit bone, but you don't want to go on your tailbone. Putting pressure on the tailbone usually makes it very, very unhappy. So do not want to roll right onto your tailbone, but you can roll around the sit bone, and especially then getting into the hamstring connections just below the sit bone, and I'm just rolling a little bit back and forth on that. Then I can go a little more into the muscle. I can roll back and forth a bit, or just find a spot, go a little bit side to side. And move back a little further. Go into the next spot. And a little further. You could do this with a foam roller as well. Whatever you have available. And I could work my way down the leg here, but I'm just going to pause here, and I'm going to bring the ball in under my knee. And I don't want to put a ton of pressure into that, but I'm going to take one hand above the knee, one hand below, and give those a little bit of pull apart. And again, you know, as I've been saying the whole time, often the outside a little bit tighter. I might want to give that a little bit more stretch, while I might want to emphasize the connection along the inside of the knee, especially if I'm someone who's a little bit knock-kneed. And then I'm going to let that go and just leave both legs down. And again, I can feel, I almost have a sense of this leg being longer than the other one. So then coming into the left sit bone and going to come up on that. And I think this screen is mirroring, so it looks as though I'm saying the opposite. But those of you who know me know that left and right is not my strongest thing anyway. So, working around the sit bone a little bit, and again I can go to the inside, but I'm not going to go over too close to the tailbone. But then getting right into just off the sit bone and into the tops of the hamstrings there, and giving that some attention. And then can move a little further and give the next spot. The rolling back and forth just gives me a chance to catch more of the fibers of the different hamstrings, so that I get a little bit more the outside, a little bit more the inside. And going down a little further. And depending on how tight you are, you might feel it a little bit clunky in spots, so I'm hitting one of my very tight spots there. And then move a little bit more. I'm again going in behind the knee and don't want to put too much pressure on this, but just giving it a little attention and going to pull and make more space. So I'm pulling up with the hand on my thigh, pulling down with the hand on my shin, trying to separate the outside, maybe coax the inside together just a little bit. Okay, and letting that go. I'm going to come up and stand one more time and get a sense of how I am on my legs now. So having concentrated, again, a lot on the back of the leg, especially for those of you who do get very tight and locked up in these hip flexors, sometimes giving more attention to the hamstrings, to the back of the leg, can get more of the release there and get more of the space. So just putting these back down and going to check and see where is my stretch right now. So pretty good right at the moment. And again, many of you much stretchier than I am. So thank you very much. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in comments or things like that. And I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you. Bye.